Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology, and I want to welcome you to my weekly forecast for May 6th to May 12th, 2024. This week, the major planetary aspects look absolutely lovely. No major squares or cacophonous oppositions. What we have is a new moon in Taurus and a lovely Sun Saturn sextile taking place between the zodiac signs of Taurus and Pisces, both which will be taking place on May 7th. What happens when we have something like a sextile, which is similar to what happens when we have something like a trine, these are both seen as benevolent aspects in astrology, is that the planets change their dispositions. Now, if the planet is Venus or Jupiter, it's already in a good disposition because these are the two benefics in astrology. Benefics are planets that bring good things. However, if it's a planet like Mars or Saturn, or even the moderns like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, usually these planets can be a bit on the disruptive end or the difficult and challenging end. But what happens? What happens when they form a sextile is the planets change their disposition. It doesn't make them absolutely golden and good, but it turns their disposition into something more favorable. And this is exactly what's happening on May 7th when the Sun in Taurus forms a sextile to Saturn in Pisces. So, what is this going to do? Saturn is known as the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations. Whenever you have Saturn conjunct a planet, it has a tendency to be a bit of a wet blanket when it comes to that planet being able to manifest its energy. And then when Saturn squaring a planet can almost be like, oh, I don't know if you remember this comic strip of Lucy and Charlie Brown and the football, and that every time Charlie Brown would go racing for the football, Lucy would move it at the last minute, and his kick would turn into a backwards flip that landed a bonk on top of his head. And no matter how many times Lucy promised to be on good behavior, she always snatched the football out from him just as he was about to kick it, and once again, he would perform his backwards flip-flop. Well, that can sometimes be Saturn when it's squaring. Saturn isn't squaring this week. And Saturn in an opposition makes things more difficult simply because it's completely withdrawing its energy. The harder you strive to accomplish your goal, the more Saturn retreats and withdraws its energy away from you, so that obstacle remains forever out of reach. But what happens when Saturn forms a sextile? When Saturn forms a sextile to a planet, like the Sun, it becomes a mentoring figure. Now, it is said that Saturn, the planet of test, trials, and tribulations, is also the planet of the teacher in astrology. And in many ways, that's true. Saturn teaches by helping you to build on resources and abilities that you didn't think you had. But not all the time is Saturn being a particularly supportive or helpful teacher. Saturn can teach you through hard lessons, through rough reality checks. Saturn can teach you by saying, okay, you've come this far, and now I'm going to raise the bar and make you reach further. It's for your own good. Okay, and this is times when even Saturn, when it's trying to teach us, can become too difficult. We don't get a sense of having achieved something, or if we accomplish something, now we're ready to go and try something that's steeper in terms of its challenge. And this can be very difficult on the self-esteem. And this can be very difficult when it comes to one's sense of accomplishment. But as I said, Saturn changes its disposition this week. It changes its disposition because of the sextile. So what Saturn's going to do is that it becomes a more helpful, benevolent mentor figure. A mentor is someone that we turn to, not just to learn a lesson, like a teacher teaches us a lesson. A teacher can be teaching you a curriculum that you're really not all that interested in. But the difference between a teacher and a mentor is that a mentor shows up and works with you in an area of life that you truly want to develop, or that you're even having a lot of difficulty with. Mentors can also be a bit like tutors. So what a mentor does is a mentor reacquaints you with your talents and your skills. A mentor builds up your confidence. A mentor shows you the ropes. Let's say you're starting a new job or a new profession. A mentor shows you how it's done. A mentor is there to share with you institutional knowledge that has been acquired over generations. This is what a mentor can do. And so, this is how a mentor helps you to become the best that you could possibly be at a particular trade or job or skill set. A mentor is there to help you to develop these abilities to the best of your capacity. And then when you're sort of on your own 2 feet, you're ready to go out into the world, a mentor is the first one to wave behind you and give you a thumbs up and say, you go get them. I know that you can do this. So what happens with the Sun in Taurus forming a sextile to a Saturn in Pisces is that instead of it being withdrawing in an emotional way, and Saturn in Pisces can bring a sense of emotional withdrawal. And if you have it in your own horoscope, it can bring a sense of isolation and even depression. What happens is that the Sun in Taurus unlocks that Saturn so that it actually becomes more Piscean. And it becomes more Piscean in a benevolently Saturnian way. So what it does is that it opens up the sensitivity and the empathy more than just feeling sympathetic or empathetic with someone who's going through a tough time, but by opening up the Saturn quality of the Pisces, what you get is someone who's empathetic and knows how to help you solve your problem. They're sympathetic and they know what you need to do in order to access certain resources or contact certain agencies or parties who can help you with a situation. So Saturn becomes more of a hands-on, let me show you how you can do this in Pisces when it's forming a sextile to the Sun in Taurus. Remember, the Sun in Taurus is in an earth sign. Earth signs want results. So earth signs aren't just like, oh, I feel bad, that's terrible, and just consoling. And with this kind of a sextile, you console, and then you say, okay, you've had a good cry and you've gotten upset. Now, what do you want to do about it? What do you think you should do in order to make this situation better for you? So it's not just a consoling shoulder. There's also advice, support, and guidance. So the first sign that we're going to look at for this week is the zodiac sign of Aries. And what's going on with Aries is interesting. Why is it interesting? It's interesting because there's been a kind of turning of the tables that has taken place without Aries being too certain as to why. What you may be experiencing, Aries, this week is a boss or a supervisor who's always been rather maybe demanding or didn't treat you with great respect or didn't show a great appreciation for your skills or for your abilities, or simply didn't even recognize what you do and what value you bring to your work. Suddenly there's a change in this boss's or this supervisor's disposition. Now, did this boss or supervisor get wind that you were feeling rejected or dissatisfied? Did this boss or supervisor get wind that maybe you were looking for a job at another company? Whatever the case is, suddenly they're going to be very welcoming to you, very wanting to have a talk with you. You may even have a meeting with a boss or a supervisor, could even be a client this week, in which you might be a little bit surprised by how all of a sudden they're all ears. They want to know what they can do to bring about a more creative and collaborative relationship with you. They want to know about your ideas. They're very interested in your input, and they want to see where you want to go in the company. They may even be talking to you about your future, things that you sort of had longed for them to talk about, and then all of a sudden now they're talking about. Now, it makes a lot of sense that you might be surprised and even a bit like suspicious, like all of a sudden, why are they so interested? But what they're trying to do is to change the energy. And this is response to the sextiles that are going on in the sky that I was talking about. But more specifically, what I see it being a response to is the moon in Gemini forming a sextile to Mars in Aries on May 9th. This is a kind of team player camaraderie sort of sextile. It's the sort of thing that maybe you've gone out for a team and you were sort of treated like the back line or something like that. And all of a sudden you're being recognized by the coach and brought forward, and the coach or the team leader is now going to focus on you. So this is what we can get when the moon is in Gemini, forming a sextile to Mars in your own zodiac sign. But the question is this a little, too late? In other words, maybe you have circulated your resume. Maybe you have made a decision to go and interview for a job somewhere else. Is this change in disposition going to be enough to make you want to stay put? That's something that I want you to sort of pause and think about. I want you to almost sort of like hold it as a card in your hand. Okay, let them talk about and make these wonderful overtures and be agreeable and meet with them and even share ideas. But Aries, what I want to point out is that Jupiter is about to enter the zodiac sign of Gemini on May 25th. And that's something that you kind of like want to hold off and see what's going to happen, because you may find that this change in disposition has a wider effect, and that you have more than just one or two parties interested in working with you in the future. For those of you born under Taurus, you're going to feel the energy of the new moon in your zodiac sign on May 7th. This is a wonderful new moon. Why? Because the moon is exalted in the zodiac sign of Taurus. This is like being waited upon hand and foot at a 4-star hotel. It's a marvelous experience. It's wonderful to be handed the glass of champagne as you enter, and to have the bed already turned down and spa reservations made free of charge by the hotel. I mean, this is a very luxuriant and wonderful moon. Now, I would love it if it actually manifested in your life as all of a sudden, carte blanche at your favorite high-end hotel. But what it's really going to do is that it's going to really emphasize the Venusian qualities of your zodiac sign. Remember that Taurus is ruled by the planet Venus, and Venus is all about the law of attraction. When Venus is very strong, it brings people into your life. You don't have to go out and search for opportunities or make a contact or impress someone. When Venus is really strong in your chart, you get to sort of sit back and enjoy people coming and courting you. So how do you want to work this new moon energy? What it's emphasizing in your solar horoscope is that part of your solar chart that has to do with friends in high places. When you have Venus very strong, like it's your ruling planet, you're a Taurus or a Libra, they have this experience too. There's this sort of collection of friends and friends of friends who are in high places. What do I mean by a friend in a high place? A friend in a high place is someone you know who's higher up on the ladder of success than you are. It's someone that you know who's higher in social status, who's in a position to open doors for you or make introductions for you. They're in a position to promote you to people that you would not have been able to meet otherwise. This is something that's going to be powerfully emphasized this week for you. And so this makes this week the perfect time to ask for a favor, to ask for a recommendation, or a valuable introduction. Now, being a Taurus, you might be a little shy about this. You don't like working a social network in the way that an air sign does. I mean, air signs are very comfortable with this. They're all about shaking hands and mixing and mingling and doing the meet and greet. They really love and adore this. Air signs are so comfortable in this element where they are circulating around the room and collecting names and numbers. No, when you're a Taurus and you're an earth sign, your comfort level is really more with the work that I do and what I have to show for myself in terms of my hard work and labor. And that's really wonderful as far as it goes. But there are going to be certain times in life in which you might need certain people praising your efforts and putting you in contact with people who could use your particular talents or skill set. And this is what the stars are saying for you this week. As I said, it's the perfect time to ask for a recommendation, to ask for a valuable introduction, or to ask for a favor. So you're going to want to do that this week. Now, there's also a little bit of urgency with making your ask. And the reason for this urgency is that Jupiter, the planet of good fortune and higher purpose, is winding up its stay in the zodiac sign of Taurus. That means your year of feeling like MVP or being recognized or having an experience of good fortune or maybe even protection, because Jupiter also bequeaths that, this is winding up. This is coming to an end. And on May 25th, Jupiter does indeed leave the zodiac sign of Taurus, and it enters the zodiac sign of Gemini. So you have the time between now and May 25th to make those asks, because afterwards, your request may not be honored or may not be responded to. Remember that people like helping out someone that they perceive as a winner. And when you're riding this sort of Jupiterian good fortune wave, you're looking like a winner and you're looking like the person that people want to support, endorse, and introduce to others who can help you out. Hello, Gemini. Once upon a time, the end justified the means. But nowadays, you're not so sure. That's because you have Saturn currently transiting through the zodiac sign of Pisces, as well as Neptune, which is also transiting through the zodiac sign of Pisces. What does this mean to you as a Gemini? Well, these are challenging aspects because Saturn squares the zodiac sign of Gemini and Neptune squares the zodiac sign of Gemini. So what you're feeling is thwarted in terms of getting the things that you want. As I said, the end may no longer justify the means. In other words, your approach to a situation may no longer be worth what you did to follow this approach. It may no longer be worth your devotion. It may no longer be worth its merit. So what you're experiencing in your life right now with these squares being picked up is that what was supposed to be swift and expedient in your life has now become a long and winding road. So you're asking yourself questions about, who do I trust? What's at stake in my life? Do future gains outweigh my current woes? And is there such a thing as a there? These are more philosophical questions than a Gemini is accustomed to. And what I mean by philosophical is that they're questions that don't necessarily have an answer. They're kind of open-ended questions. Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury. Mercury is very inquisitive, and Mercury is very curious, and Mercury asks a lot of questions. But the sort of questions that Mercury asks, basically along the lines of, how do I get from here to there? So Mercury being your ruling planet, you like information that's immediately accessible, directions that lead to their destination, and information that you can apply immediately in your life. These are the things that Gemini looks for. Gemini isn't really into asking things like, is there a there, or even what's it all about, Alfie? So, but this week, you're asking those questions. A big part of it also has to do with the fact that Jupiter is winding up its stay in the zodiac sign of Taurus. Taurus is the zodiac sign that precedes you. So you've been feeling recently, this kind of sense that things are about to turn in your favor, and it can't come quickly enough, and you would really like for this to happen, but that hasn't happened yet, okay? Jupiter is winding up its stay in the sign that precedes yours. It's not in your sign yet. So again, that sort of leads itself to this kind of like Jupiterian philosophical soul searching in which you're really not even sure what exactly you're searching your soul for. Now, everything gets better when Jupiter enters your zodiac sign on May 25th. Okay, I can absolutely assure you of that. You might even want to have a party and confetti and party hats. I mean, it's worth celebrating. It's not going to transform your life overnight, but you can see where things are going to improve. You're going to feel like you've got your mojo back, like you're back on track. But Jupiter isn't there yet. And so what I want you to do is sort of like allow yourself this kind of like soul searching moment and to think and ponder these things, but don't insist on getting a satisfactory result or an applicable solution. That's not going to happen right now. What you want to do actually is sort of practice patience and not get dragged down by melancholy or by a sort of depression, anxiety, or even despair. I mean, those feelings might be going on, but know that they're transitory, that they're ephemeral, they're not going to stay. And this is really literally what the nighttime sky looks like before you see the rays of dawn. So, are you a Cancer who loves too much? That's the question that loved ones and friends will be asking when you turn and try to help someone out, someone who's been making your life miserable lately. All water signs have great empathy and great compassion and great sympathy. And Cancer, of course, is a water sign. And so if someone is in trouble, if someone needs you, you can't help but respond emotionally to them. And in this particular week, it may be someone who really hasn't done you any good. Now, this might be an ex-lover, but it could also just as easily be an unrepentant sibling or a client or even a boss that you used to work for who really made your life miserable. And now they have great need of you and they're asking you to come back. They're asking you to help out. And friends and loved ones and maybe even colleagues are saying, why are you even picking up the phone? Why are you even answering that text? Are you crazy? How can you possibly go back? You need to fortify your boundaries. Okay, boundaries. This is a word that's always being used with water signs. It's often used with Pisces, but Scorpios and Cancers get it too. People will say to them, you need to draw boundaries and stay on your side of those boundaries. Now, that's going to make sense if you're an earth sign. If you're an earth sign, you don't need to draw boundaries. You were born with them. And it's going to make sense if you're an air sign because intellectually and conceptually, you could understand boundaries. All right, that's something that could be a legal term or a promise or a pledge. If you make a promise or a pledge, you need to keep it if you're an air sign. These are things air signs take very, very seriously. Fire signs don't really worry about boundaries because they don't really understand the concept. But water signs have a great deal of difficulty with drawing boundaries. They have a great deal of difficulty with drawing that line in the sand because if you draw the line in the sand, the ocean naturally comes, with a wave and the wave spills over the line of the sand, retracts into the ocean, and there went your line in the sand. I mean, drawing a line in the sand is something that water signs just don't get. And that's because water signs come from the ocean, okay, which covers 3/4 of the planet Earth. And so what does boundaries mean to fish who swim in the ocean? It's almost practically meaningless. And so as a Cancer, you have that same sort of psychological and even psychic response to boundaries. But more importantly than that, and this isn't to say that Cancers are everyone's doormat, they are not, but more importantly than that, you sense that someone is in trouble. And when you have that kind of water compassion that you do, you can't help but respond. Now, this isn't going to be done in a self-sacrificing or martyr type of way. We've got the Sun in Taurus forming a sextile to Saturn in Pisces. It's going to be done in a fashion where you practically want to help that person to help themselves. What Saturn in Pisces teaches by sextiling the Sun in Taurus is the strength of compassion. Okay, compassion doesn't just make you a bleeding heart. When you show compassion for someone else, you want to help that person up. You want to help that person to do better. And helping people up and helping people do better has a wonderful effect, not only on the person that you're helping out, but on the people around them. So as a Cancer, you really won't give up on anyone as long as there's a glimmer of hope of them being a better person. Now, this may come across to other people as masochistic, but for you, you would never be able to live with yourself if you didn't help when someone needed it the most. The message for you, Leo, this week is less push is more pull. And that's because your ruling planet, the Sun, is forming a sextile to Saturn in the zodiac sign of Pisces. Now, a ruling planet is like your patron saint, life coach, den mother, and corporate sponsor all wrapped up into one. So the ruling planet is what we really look for in a horoscope to sort of see how things are faring for you. Leos have a ruling planet, which is the Sun, and of course the Sun is the only ruling planet that's really a star. What's the point of this? The point of this is that the Sun has a magnetic pull. The Sun's magnetic pull, in fact, keeps all the planets locked in their orbits revolving around the Sun. So Leos have a natural charisma. They have a natural magneticism that other people are attracted to. But Leos aren't always confident about this magneticism. And so they can't always read other people as well as they should, or at least as well as an air sign can. This week, because the Sun is so magnificently aspected, not only by the sextile to these Saturn in Pisces, but it being part of a new moon energy, and the new moon in Taurus being an exalted position for that new moon. Now, the new moon is the time of month when the moon is in front of the Sun. Basically, what that means during a new moon is that the Sun takes a back seat to the moon. What that means for you as a Leo is that you're not really aware of your magnetism and you're not really aware of your charisma. In some sense, you may even feel like you've been moved to the back seat, and that's making you antsy, and that's making you a bit nervous. Okay, and that's because the Sun wants to shine. What you need to do is cool it. This week, because of the energies of Taurus, and Taurus being ruled by Venus, and Venus really triggering the law of attraction as far as it's concerned with you, people want to contribute to your success. This could manifest as moral support. This could be people more than happy to make timely introduction for you in order to promote your efforts, or this could even show up as financial backing. But what you need to remember during this period of time is that you don't have to show that you deserve it. Whenever people want to give fire signs things, that makes fire signs more fiery. It's almost like dropping logs of wood on a fire. You put logs of wood on the fire and you feed the fire gets bigger. When you have people wanting to do things for you, especially if you're a Leo, you want to get more like, thank you, or of course you want to do things for me, or let me show you why you should do something for me, okay? Leos, when they are experiencing people doing good things for them, tend to get louder and tend to burn brighter. But what you want to do is sort of dial it down. And if you're making a request or asking a favor, what you want to do is use a soft touch. This is not a time to tell people about how good you are, or to overwhelm them with all your ideas that you have, or to overload them with demands and requests. You know, you don't want to keep piling the logs on the fire in response to people wanting to do something good for you. What you want to do is to be humble. And what I mean by that is to humbly ask for someone's help, to show appreciation. Right now, it's other people that want to be shown off and not you. That's why I'm saying you sort of want to back off the fiery energy and let them glow in the radiance and the satisfaction of helping you. They feel really wonderful about being of assistance, of having advice, and maybe words of wisdom. And so what you want to do as a Leo is that you want to follow their advice, and you want to thank them for their counsel. And you want to say things like, that's really good advice. I never thought of that before. Or, you know, I struggled with that problem for a real long time. I never thought of doing it the way that you're talking about doing it. When you say those things, when you acknowledge that someone has been of help to you, or that someone is assisting you, You make that person feel good about giving their advice. You make that person feel good about supporting you. And so you also make them feel needed. There's a lot of talk about, Leos always needing a pat on the back or a stroke of the ego or something like that. But this is one of those times when you want to let people take pride in your accomplishments. They are so happy with what you're doing. And when you thank them for that, when you say things like, I couldn't have done it without you, or, oh boy, you were right there and so helpful, and just you're the star here. You're really great. When you shine your light on them, that makes them feel wonderful. And it also makes them want to help you more in the future. Everyone has a grand design in life. Everyone has a higher purpose. But Virgo, you're not going to recognize yours as long as you keep pressing your nose to the grindstone. Now, Virgos are famous for keeping their deadlines and following their to-do lists. These act really like maps in your life, as ways of getting from here to there, which makes perfect sense since you are ruled by the planet Mercury. And Mercury is the planet of guides. Mercury rules over people who can help you get to where you want to go, or people who can help you get the things that you want in life. And Virgos often occupy those types of positions in their life. So with your deadlines and your to-do list, with your day sort of mapped out in front of you of the things that you need to do, and every time you check something off your to-do list, you can pat yourself on the back, and every time you meet a deadline, you're like, huzzah! These are wonderful experiences for Virgo. But what can happen is that over a period of time, deadlines and to-do lists can begin to narrow your vision, all right? You kind of become addicted to the next thing that needs to be done on your agenda. So what's happening here with the sun being in the zodiac sign of Taurus, forming a sextile to Saturn in Pisces, is that sun sextile is interrupting what has been an opposition that you've been experiencing for a while, with Saturn being in your opposite sign. As I referenced earlier in this week's forecast, when Saturn is opposite your sign, there's always this feeling that no matter what you do, you will never be able to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. You're never going to be able to cross that finish line. That Saturn, if it's opposite you, is deliberately withholding. It can withhold approval, it can withhold reward, it can withhold resources, no matter what you do. That opposition energy gets broken up during times when transiting planets form trines or sextiles. And as I said, this week we've got a sun in Taurus forming a sextile to Saturn in Pisces. Simple English, that Saturn in Pisces is no longer withholding, it's actually making things available to you. And that's why I'm saying you want to sort of relax those narrow blinders that you have on. You want to relax that focus on the deadline and on the to-do list and on the way that this has always been done. You want to relax that energy. You don't want to be so focused, because if you continue to maintain that focus, you might very well miss this subtle change in Saturn's disposition. Saturn is now opening and giving things to you, but if you're so used to it being an oppositional energy in your life, you're not going to recognize that. And so when you sort of let those blinders open and you widen your horizons, you may become aware of options materializing that weren't there before, or alternative paths appearing that you didn't recognize before. In other words, if you maintain the focus, you'll miss that. If you sort of like adopt a more relaxed position, you'll see it. Not only will you see it, you may even be thankful for it. Like, oh, wow, this is an option when I really needed it. Or, oh, I've been banging my head against the wall, getting nowhere, and now I see an alternative way of doing this. That's going to be your experience if you open yourself up to and become receptive to this sextile energy. A wider scope not only broadens your horizons, a wider scope also teaches you to appreciate them. Hello, Libra. This week is a bit of a wrinkle for you. Now, don't get upset with me. I know that you're tired of me saying a bit of a wrinkle with me. Christopher, you've been talking about nothing but challenges and problems and all these difficulties. When does Libra ever get a break? And let me assure you, you are going to get your break very soon, just not now. Now I want you to focus on this kind of wrinkle, this sort of like a wild curve that you're going to be thrown this week. Now, what's going to happen this week is that you're going to be asked to stop what you're doing and to attend to a very private matter. Now, this couldn't have come at a more inconvenient time. Maybe you're in the final stages of negotiating something. Maybe you're setting up a sale, or maybe you're about to close on a deal. And because of this private matter, you're going to have to stop what you're doing and go and attend to it. Now, part of you might be like, this is wildly inconvenient. Maybe I can get to this after I close on this deal or resolve this negotiation. You're not going to be able to. The reason for this is because of the new moon in Taurus. The new moon in Taurus is taking place at a very peculiar angle of your solar horoscope. It's taking place in a part of your solar chart that doesn't really connect with you. Okay, now usually this would be something that you just don't get, and maybe you have to deal with a situation that you weren't able to salvage or deal with. It's kind of like, imagine a volleyball team in grade school and three people saying, I've got it, as the volleyball comes over the net, and everyone, stopping because someone else said they had it, and the ball bouncing on the ground and bouncing and dribbling outside the court. Okay. You can see what my early education with volleyball training was like. Okay, that's typically how a quincunx energy works, and a quincunx energy is exactly what I'm describing today. But the new moon is in the zodiac sign of Taurus. Your sun is in the zodiac sign of Libra, and you both share Venus as a ruling planet. So there's going to be this sense that all of a sudden there's a moral debt that needs to be paid. Maybe it's a financial debt that needs to be paid. Someone is in need of you in a very private sector of your life, and you have to stop what you're doing and attend to it. Part of that is the obligation of the shared rulership, the shared planet Venus. But a bigger part of that is you're an air sign. You're born under the zodiac sign of Libra. And so this is going to be someone that you gave your word to. And for air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, when they give their word, they keep it. They expect other people to do that, and you as a Libra, you're going to do that as well. Just as a quick side note, this is why Libras are so difficult to get a promise of a commitment from. Okay, it's not because Libras are wishy-washy, it's because Libras know that when they promise that commitment, that they have to keep it. And so that's exactly what's going to be called in this week, probably sometime around the new moon in Taurus on May 7th. So being asked to walk away from a negotiation, being asked to walk away from a deal right when you're about to close it, it's hard to forfeit this claim. It's hard to give up this upper hand that you had. But what I want you to realize, or what I want you to sort of appreciate, is that just because you're giving up this opportunity, just because the deal is botched, doesn't mean that it's been lost. This wrinkle that I'm talking about works both ways. On one end, it works as an inconvenience that may rob you of something that you very much wanted. But at the same time, it introduces an unexpected delay or detour that ultimately winds up working out for you. In one regard, it might be that you may find yourself rewarded for having made this sacrifice on some sort of karmic level, that something that you had lost comes full circle, comes around again, and you meet it again at a later time when you can secure that deal. Or it may mean that what you were struggling for wasn't as good as you thought it was, and that even though you're distracted by having to fulfill a personal obligation, when you come back to the situation, you might find a new, improved, and a better opportunity or offer waiting for you on the table. Scorpios are unflinching in the face of a crisis. This is why a friend or a loved one is going to seek you out this week. Your matter-of-fact approach to life's troubles, your way of sort of like calling it the way it is, speaking the truth, this is something that a lot of people rely on. A lot of people, when they're facing a crisis or something difficult, they are full of apprehension, they're full of anxiety, they're full of despair. I mean, what if this crushes me? What if this wipes out everything that I have? The reason why they will turn to you, Scorpio, is because you've stood on the edge of the abyss more times than other people could count on their fingers. You're used to a crisis. Do you love it? No, you don't. But you know how to handle it when it shows up. You have a way of staring into the abyss and just kind of, I don't know, laughing in the face of disaster. There's that sort of infernal pride that Scorpios have, and it's a wonderful quality that comes out when things are getting difficult, when people are pleading to invisible forces to come to their rescues. Scorpios are the ones who are going to say, you know what, forget it. Don't wait for that to happen. We can handle it ourselves. So as a Scorpio, you may be sitting down with someone who's weeping over a heartbreak, or you may be sitting down with someone who's gotten some terrible news and doesn't know how to process it, and maybe they're just paralyzed, and you're going to help them to process this information, and you're going to help them sort out through everything that's going on, and you're going to make them feel strong. You're going to make them feel emboldened. You're going to make them feel like they can get through this. As a Scorpio, this is where you go anyway. Now, that's not to say that Scorpios have their moments of being flipped out or worried or despairing, but that's usually outside of a crisis. You know, that's usually with a sort of feeling that a shadow has been cast on what's going on and that something terrible may happen. You put a Scorpio in a crisis, okay, and they will flourish. It's kind of like stage fright. A performer is most frightened, you know, when they're thinking of getting on stage, and that's when they're like really nervous and they forget their lines or they forget all the steps to the ballet. But once they've made their entrance, they are on, they are in that moment. And for Scorpios, that's where Scorpios really roar to life, is when something like this happens. Now, as a Scorpio, you have also an ability to keep your cool when everyone else is losing theirs. And as a Scorpio, you have that unique ability to make people laugh in the most dismal moments. Okay. Now, you're not making fun of them or getting them to make fun of themselves at all. No, but you have a sort of withering way of saying something that's going on that all of a sudden reduces the magnitude of something that feels very frightening and overwhelming and makes it funny or makes it laughable. You have that kind of sardonic humor that comes from having been there and done this several times before. Now, as a Scorpio, you're also loyal as the day is long, and you will always stick by the people that you care about. In fact, what you're going to prove once again to loved ones and to friends is that anyone who's lucky enough to have you in their life knows that they will always prevail. For Sagittarians, this is going to be a bit of an odd week. You're coming down off the high of that marvelous, wild solar eclipse energy in Aries. You didn't always know how to maybe manage it or direct it when it was coming through, but it really acted as an adrenaline rush in your horoscope, and it made you feel very capable of handling anything and impervious and on top of the world. So you're coming down off of that high. That doesn't mean that you're going to wipe out. You're not going to wipe out at all, but the planets have moved into more earthy type of energy, and earth and fire don't always get one another. And in fact, because we have a new moon taking place in the zodiac sign of Taurus, as I referenced earlier with Libra, the sign of Taurus forms a quincunx to the zodiac sign of Sagittarius. Quincunxes are very peculiar aspects in astrology. All aspects in astrology describe some kind of a relationship. And what I'm referencing here are the Ptolemaic aspects: a conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile. A conjunction is we're on the same page. An opposition is we are polar opposites on this. A square is trying to get the upper hand in a struggle or a fight. A trine is unconditional support. And a sextile is I'm not completely in your corner, but let's work together for our mutual benefit, and we can put aside our differences and get this project or this endeavor done. That's the nature of a sextile. A quincunx, although it's not a Ptolemaic aspect, is a very ancient one. Paulus Alexandrinus, I believe, is the first one to refer to it. It's where the two signs don't get each other, but when they walk away and say, we're not going to get each other, they stop and they say, okay, let's give it another try. And then they're going to try to get each other again. So what happens with a quincunx is the two signs don't get along, but it's not because they hate each other. They don't. But they also don't get along because they especially like each other either. What it is that they're kind of baffled as to why they don't get along. And the two signs are looking to find a fit, which is why when I see quincunx energy very strong in a horoscope forecast, I always warn people, like I'm warning you right now, not to force a fit. In other words, you may face a sort of predicament, or you may face a sort of quandary in which you may feel like you want to make it work, but you don't really know how to make it work. And you're trying to find some sort of way to resolve or maybe even compromise. This could materialize as a supervisor who just doesn't get you and you don't get them, no matter how many times you try. It can be a mutual friend in which you think it's great that your friends like this person, but you don't really. Or it could be a colleague in which the two of you just read each other's signals wrong. Okay, there's always misunderstandings. One of you laughs and the other one's like, what are you laughing at? That sort of thing. It's an awkward, not getting along type of quality. What this new moon, because it's at such an odd angle to your sun, what this new moon is going to do is that it's going to give you a sort of existential sense of something not being right. And I'm using the word existential deliberately. It's going to be a sort of general sense that something isn't right. And it's hard for you to explain. Friends may be like, well, come on, let's talk it through. Like, why do you think this wouldn't work? And you try to talk it through, but the words just don't come. You just don't feel like it's right. Like you can trust this, like you have faith in an endeavor, like you can really give a project your full backing or endorsement. And so friends might, and maybe even loved ones too, might accuse you of being overly pessimistic. Like why are you being such a downer or spoiler or something like that? But it just doesn't sit right with you. This feeling of moving ahead on something just doesn't sit right with you. And so what you're going to want to do with something like this is not force a fit, not make yourself put on a smiley face and say, things are okay, let's go forward. I want you to pay attention to this feeling. Are you going to get an answer or solution right away? No, it's going to be a great feeling of discomfort. So what I want you to do is that when you're facing a choice or decision that you're making this week, think of your contingency plans. Work out what you're going to do if this action or if this avenue you want to pursue doesn't work out. I want you to have a plan B ready. And while we're talking about it, I also want you to have a plan C ready. You may not need them. In the end, this may all have been just existential and not anything that materializes in it as anything, because quincunx have that kind of wonky flavor to them. But you don't want to be caught napping either. You don't want to be caught like saying something's okay when it's not okay, or fully moving forward on something when you don't feel in your gut like it's right. What's nice about a quincunx is that the effect of the quincunx is quickly passing. So where you have this feeling of being ill at ease, you may see it play out, but you also may not see it play out. But what I can assure you is that by the coming weekend, by May 12th, you will definitely know what's what. And either that will lead you to breathe a sigh of relief, or you'll be glad that you had a fallback plan when you went ahead and put it together. For Capricorn, your message this week is something's got to give. Now, I don't mean that as a sort of plaintive cry to the heavens of something's got to give. My life is, unlivable. I can't continue carrying this burden. Something's got to relent. Capricorns tend to respond to that idea as a personal challenge. And so if it's a feeling of like, something's got to give and things are tough, well, I'm just going to have to power through and tough it out. Or that's usually the Capricornian response to something like this. When I'm talking about something's got to give, I'm talking about your ruling planet Saturn in Pisces forming a sextile to a very amiable Sun in Taurus. And when I talk about something's got to give with you, it's one of those burdens that you're carrying around on your shoulders. It's one of those expectations that you're making yourself live up to. Believe it or not, and I hope you do, you have too many. And one of them can go, maybe even two or three. In any case, there comes a time when we outgrow certain perspectives. Okay, as a Capricorn, earlier in your life, and maybe you still practice it to this day, you take on burdens and obligations and responsibilities, and the heavier, the stronger you feel. It's kind of like a weightlifting class at the gym, all right? But you've reached a time in your life in which your perspective is changing. And again, this is a very subtle change in disposition that's going on with your ruling planet in the zodiac sign of Pisces. You're reaching a time in your life when you're probably finally believing friends when they say that you work harder than most and you accomplish much of what you set out to do, and you hold yourself to high standards that are impressive. But these aren't standards or expectations that are necessarily shared or appreciated by other people. Let me unpack that idea. Capricorns can take great pride in maintaining high expectations, and they can take great pride in reaching for high standards or standing by high standards. I mean, it's a Capricorn that's going to say, someone has to keep the high standards, and if that's me, then so be it, I will keep the high standards. But sometimes when you're maintaining standards and expectations that are high, when you're born under Saturn, the feeling is you don't. Saturn sort of gives this idea that maybe one day you'll reach them, but being a Capricorn, you won't. Okay. And that's because you probably exceeded the standards and exceeded the expectations a long time ago. But your raison d'etre, your reason for being, is to keep climbing higher and higher and higher. And you may have gotten to a certain point in your life in which you accomplished these things a long time ago, but they're on the mountain peak that's far below where you are right now. And you may be at such a lofty peak that you're the only one who appreciates that you're standing by your high standards or that you've realized your high expectations. And instead of making it even higher and more distant and getting yourself to strive even more, maybe what you want to do is lower them a little. You don't have to keep increasing the weights on the weight machine to lift them. There may come a time in which it's impressive, and then people got tired of being impressed a long time ago, and they moved on to different things, and you don't really have that feeling of appreciation or support that you used to have. And that's the time when you need to turn to yourself. That's the time when you need to loosen up on the tight reins. This is a little bit similar to the idea that I was sharing with Virgos in this week's forecast. There's nothing wrong with lowering the expectations when they're as high as you hold them. And there's nothing wrong with lowering the standards when they're as high as you raise them up in your life. In fact, lowering them a bit might actually allow you to enjoy your life a little more, might allow you to enjoy the sights around you on your way to your destination. I don't know, even allow you to enjoy the fruits of your labors, things that all of us have been put on this planet to enjoy. And you don't need to be working so slavishly for things that other people don't really get or maybe even appreciate. And maybe this work ethic has gone a little bit too far. And it wouldn't be the worst thing for you to lighten up, which is a perfect thing to do under a very relaxed sun in Taurus and a forgiving Saturn in Pisces. I'm always perplexed when people describe Aquarius as being airy-fairy. I don't find anything like that about them at all. They're very serious-minded, very present, they're very conscious and conscientious. And if they come across as airy-fairy, it's not in a ridiculous way. It might be other people's way of trying to describe a sort of abstract quality, or maybe even a spacey quality. But that spacey quality doesn't come from an empty mind. That spacey quality comes from a mind which is very active on many different levels of thinking and consciousness all at the same time. And so they may have a empty expression, but that doesn't mean lights on and nobody home. There's a very active mind behind that expression. So this week, you Aquarians will be asked to make the tough call that nobody else wants to make. And maybe this was a problem that other people didn't want to handle. Maybe this was a predicament that people were out of their element with. Maybe this was a dilemma that people couldn't figure out heads or tails of. But in any case, it has wound up on your desk. Okay, the buck has been passed around the circle a number of times, and now it's in your lap. Now it's there for you to deal with. Now, it's amazing how calm and clear-eyed Aquarians can be in a crisis. Again, this is a zodiac sign that can sort of go to pieces anticipating a crisis. All air signs work on some amount of nervous energy, but Aquarians can actually be fueled by a tremendous amount of nervous energy, and they can get a bit scattered or a bit fragmented when they have the idea that they're going to be facing a crisis. They can sort of almost go to pieces. But the moment that they're in a crisis, you know that crisis is real, it's arrived, it's landed on the lap or knocked on the door and is at their front doorstep, Aquarians can become amazingly clear-eyed and focused, and they keep their calm. This is a sign that will keep its calm while everyone else is losing theirs. This is another one that does that. As an Aquarius, you know, in regards to, I think I'm describing maybe a project or an endeavor, you know that there's no going back, okay? That what this week is actually really sort of encouraging you is to keep moving forward with something in which other people might be wanting to run backwards or get back to what they think is safer ground, but you're going to keep the ship moving forward. You know, clamping down on people or bearing down on them or maybe even punishing them for being out of line, that's not the way to go, and that's not what you're going to do. So, you know, cutting back, maybe cutting back on expenditures, cutting back on outreach, cutting back on something that had begun, like maybe an endeavor or project had really high hopes at the start, you know, a wonderful vision, but now it's going to be like peeled back or dialed down. No, as an Aquarius, you're like, no, this is what we pledged. This is what we promised to do. We're going to keep moving forward with this. And people might be like, how can you keep moving forward with this? We might have a budget that's out of sorts, or you're beyond your resources or something. We need to cut back and fall back and be safe. As an Aquarius, you're going to be, no, we're not going to do that. So there's no clamping down and there's no cutting back, because you realize that what people need right now more than anything is a vision. When people are going through rough times, when people are feeling afraid or anxious, sometimes you can be there with reassurance, or sometimes you can be there with comfort or support. But this is the sort of thing in which those things aren't going to work. The stakes are very high. So what you're going to do as an Aquarius is you're going to hold for them a vision of a better future. That's because you've sort of reached the edge People are saying, we can't make that leap. We can't make that step. We have to go back the way we have. And you're saying, no, we have to keep going. We have this vision of a better future, and we need to stay true to that no matter what it asks of all of us. Now, something that inspires people is vision. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., and his speech, I Have a Dream. When Martin Luther King Jr. made that speech, I Have a Dream, he wasn't talking about last night's dream. He didn't wake up next to Coretta and say, Coretta, I had a funky dream last night. It was really weird. No, he was talking about a dream, a vision of something better, a vision of a better society. And people might have mocked that, and people might have oppressed or pushed back on him. People might have been very afraid, like, can we continue with this civil rights movement? And Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have a dream. I have this vision. And it brought people around him. It got them to somehow move past their obstacles, their fears and anxieties. I think they always had them, but the dream was more compelling. The vision of the future was more compelling. It was more promising. So to hold a vision for people is to provide something that inspires them to self-sacrifice, and it inspires them to persevere no matter what. And remember, Aquarius, Saturn is one of your ruling planets. So what you want to do with Saturn in Pisces, forming a sextile to the Sun in Taurus, is that you want to hold that vision of, we're just about to the place where we want to be. We're just about to realize our greatest aspirations. You want to hold that vision, and if you hold that vision solidly, people will make the sacrifices. People will persevere. And if you hold that vision solidly, like you're being asked to do this week, you will rally the forces behind you. You have always seen yourself as a dreamer, Pisces. You're used to people also making fun of you for that. People saying, oh, you live in a fantasy world. Oh, you build castles in the sky. Oh, you have these silly and ridiculous dreams. And in some ways, you may feel like you're a bit of a lost cause or a hopeless romantic. You have dreams because it is the nature of Pisces to imagine something better, fuller, richer, more picturesque. This is just woven into your astrological DNA. So when the Sun forms a sextile to Saturn on May 7th, the Sun in Taurus releases the withheld energies of Saturn in your own zodiac sign. Saturn in your own zodiac sign might have made you feel a bit isolated lately. It might have made you feel a bit disappointed lately, or like, how can I make anything of these dreams? How can I make anything of this imagination? Some of you Pisces might even feel like abandoning a course that you've been on because you just don't see how you're going to make something of it. Well, when this sextile is formed between the Sun in Taurus and Saturn in Pisces, you may meet a neighbor or a coworker or an acquaintance who believes in you. This person might be someone who listens to what you have, or has looked at your sketches, or heard a couple of verses from your song, or something like that. And they might find it absolutely enchanting. Or maybe it's a casual conversation and you bring up an idea that you have, and they're like, wait, stop, that's a really amazing idea. Now, as a Pisces with Saturn traveling through your sign right now, you might have a tendency to laugh at yourself or discount your creative vision, or say, oh, it's no big deal. It's just a sort of silly, whimsical idea that I have. But what I want you to pay attention to is that it's a Saturn in Pisces that is forming a sextile to the Sun in Taurus. So what that means is that you may not be taking into account other people's enthusiasm. You may not be registering other people's excitement about your idea. You might be sort of, mulish, and you're like, oh, it's a silly idea and it's not a big thing. But when people are saying, no, it's a good idea, instead of saying, like, be like, you think so? And when they're like, yeah, it's a really good idea, What you may find happening is the person has ideas about your idea, okay? That you might be like, oh, I had this idea. They're like, that's a really great idea. And instead of going, you think so? The person might be like, well, did you ever think about, instead of a song, making it a children's book? Or did you ever think about doing this with that or doing that with that? This person is taking on an advising role because of the Saturn-Sun sextile, but you may also meet someone taking on a mentoring role who is more than happy to show you how you could develop your idea into something. So what you want to do is heed their advice and their wise counsel, because without knowing it, you might have found that special collaborator, that very special creative collaborator who can not only show you the ropes, but who can also help make your dreams a reality. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.